All right, let's go over services. Services are, surprise, services that your company offers. So we want to list all of them and how much they cost and so on and so forth. So if we click this setup button, we'll see that services is next in line for information we need to add. Okay, if your database for services is blank, meaning zero, these two buttons will show up saying you can upload a CSV of all your services. So if you have this listed somewhere else, say you have another system, you can export that, or a spreadsheet if you're operating off of, you can copy and paste that into the CSV and import it into here so you can get all your data entry done in one fell swoop instead of entering every service manually. So it's important to have a template to populate so that Project Binder can know exactly how to interpret that data, and it's very, very picky. So let's download this and take a look at it real quick, and we can talk about it. So here is the CSV. It's going to open here. Stand by. All right. So here's our services. Like I said, this is the template, so do not change any of this stuff up top. You can change the default service. Okay, so default service means when you create a new estimate, do you want this service to be added to that estimate by default? Do you want that to be checked, ready to go? Or do you want it to not be included and then you can add it on later? So if it's something you use almost every time, if not every time, default service is yes. If it's something that you use sparingly, then you'd select no. Okay, then this is pretty self-explanatory. The name of the service, the description of the service, which I think this one is pretty brief. Unit cost is how much it costs you. This is just by default kind of a guess. As you change who it's assigned to, the cost will change depending on that person's rate. But if it's unassigned, this is just a estimation of what your cost is going to be. This is how much you're going to bill your client, then how much you're going to make. So you have your cost, price, profit. Over here are going to be your product categories, which we just talked about, your group and your subgroup. Now these have to match exactly with what is already in your organizational groups. That's what we talked about that in the last video. So if you're putting something in here that isn't actually in your database, it's going to freak out and it's going to be blank. So you're going to have to go in there and manually change it, which isn't a big deal, but if you think it's going to figure it out, it's going to go wonky when you try to create an estimate. So make sure these are all set up correctly. And then finally, the unit of measurement. This is also in your database, so make sure that these units of measurement, which we'll talk about in a few videos, are in your database too. And unit of measurement is basically how you measure the unit for which you bill. So right now we're talking about an hour. So we bill $80 an hour. We pay our DP $80 an hour, and then our company makes a $20 per hour profit. And if you want this to be $1,000 a day, then you just change this to day, but make sure day is in your database as a unit of measurement, which it is by default. Okay, so once this is done, it's going to be important to save this as an CSV. So if you hit, you can't see this, but off the side there, export to CSV, don't include the table names, and then do Unicode UTF-8. That is going to be a great way to export this. Name it as whatever you want, doesn't matter. Service upload.csv should work just fine. And we're ready to upload it to Project Binder. So we'll hit upload and click our CSV. It's going to go through and kind of find all the fields. And this is why it's important not to change any of the names. These should all find the appropriate table correctly and should all link. If any of these are gray, you can go down there and select what it's supposed to link to. Once you're ready to go, hit upload now. Give it a second, and it's going to import all of those services. So like I said, There's your default is enabled, director of photography, a description that will show up if you want on your estimate, and if your clients want to see, if they don't know what a director of photography is, you may want to include this, but you can also disable that. So it just says director of photography. The organizational groups, so this put it into production crew, camera department. External service providers, now that's interesting. What does that mean? Well, let's click on it. External service providers is going to mean who else can provide this service besides people internally. So maybe we should put this in the uploader. I'll probably make that in the next update. Come to think of it, but the person who provides this would probably be a subcontractor, because you could sub out the DP, but you probably wouldn't give it to a client. I mean, you might. You probably wouldn't give it to an intern unless you're running a really wonky shop, and a rental customer and vendor don't really make sense. So we're going to say that's a subcontractor. All right. Same thing with grip. Let's just make sure that that's a subcontractor. And director, like maybe you don't, or maybe you do. Bosses people around. I like that. Okay. And then, if you want to delete it, you can hit this delete button, change the description, and make all the settings you want. Up here, you can search for services when you start adding a whole bunch. And then it paginates down here as you get more and more and more. So now we have 3 services, and I think that's enough for you to understand how it works. Let's move on to rental products.